Randy, Johnny, please, can you mute yourself? Thank you.
Ya salimos, Tania.
Muy buenas tardes a cada uno de los participantes, quienes hoy nos están viendo a través de nuestra página oficial de Facebook. Les damos la más cordial bienvenida a esta nueva charla virtual denominada Control de la Varroa y Plagas Cuarentenarias. Esto como parte de los cursos virtuales desarrollados por el Servicio Nacional de Sanidad Agraria del Ministerio de Desarrollo Agrario y Riego. Para ello, contamos con la presencia de biólogo Randy Oliver, quien estará a cargo de desarrollar la charla virtual. Pero antes de dar inicio a la exposición, permítame darles unas pautas que debemos tener en cuenta. Es importante que las preguntas o consultas que desean realizar las harán llegar a través del Facebook oficial de SENASA y cabe recalcar que estas serán respondidas al finalizar la charla virtual. Muy bien, después de las indicaciones, presentamos al biólogo Randy Oliver, quien posee una pequeña empresa comercial de apicultura en las estribaciones del norte de California. Actualmente, sus hijos manejan alrededor de 1.500 colonias para la polinización migratoria. Además, producen reinas, núcleos y miel, debido a este importante apoyo que Randy recibe por parte de sus hijos. El biólogo puede participar a tiempo completo en proyectos de investigación, los mismos que son financiados por apicultores. Él analiza y dirige la investigación científica y está en contacto con apicultores e investigadores de todo el mundo, no solo para ampliar su propia profundidad de conocimiento, sino para descubrir las mejores prácticas de gestión para los apicultores, que luego comparte con gran alegría a través de sus diversos artículos en revistas de abejas, sus charlas y en su sitio web. Buenas tardes, biólogo Randy Oliver. Good afternoon, Randy Oliver. Welcome, bienvenido, lo escuchamos. We are going to be hearing you.
Okay, good afternoon, buenas tardes.
En este punto es importante mencionarles, queridos participantes, que la presentación que a continuación se realizará está subtitulada, por lo cual se les solicita prestar mucha atención. Asimismo, hoy contamos con la presencia de Johnny Rojas, presidente de la Confederación Nacional de Apicultores del Perú, CONAPI, quien nos acompañará durante la charla a fin de ilustrarnos un poco más sobre las cuestiones técnicas de este tema. Bienvenido, Johnny.
Gracias, Tania. Un gusto de poder saludar a todos los apicultores del Perú, de Latinoamérica y el mundo en este día muy especial de las abejas en el mundo. Las abejas son los insectos que polinizan los alimentos y el ser humano vive gracias a las abejas y la biodiversidad natural está protegido gracias a las abejas y al trabajo de los apicultores que somos nosotros. Y muchas gracias al doctor Randy Oliver, quien hoy día nos estará ilustrando acerca del tema muy interesante que los apicultores en el mundo necesitamos conocer sobre la varroa. Gracias.
Muchas gracias Johnny, muchas gracias Randy. Comencemos con el video, el cual se encuentra subtitulado.
De California, pero me habla solamente un poquito de español. We've kept bees in California on a commercial basis since the year 2001 without the use of any synthetic miticides, and we rarely lose a colony to Varroa. So I'd like to share with you what we've learned about Varroa management. Beekeeping used to be much easier before Varroa arrived. And similar to us humans right now, who are experiencing a virus pandemic, when Varroa arrived, it kicked off a virus pandemic in our honeybees. That virus was deformed wing virus. There's other viruses also involved, but this is the main one. And deformed wing virus is normally a relatively benign virus that can be transmitted via the eggs when the queen lays the eggs, or by the nurse bees when they feed the larva. But it normally doesn't harm the bee to any extent. It only becomes a problem when we have this parasite right here vectoring the virus. And we're right in the middle of an evolutionary process in which the honeybee is needing to learn to adapt to having a parasite that feeds on its fat bodies, very critical in its body, and at the same time injects viruses into its blood. This is a real problem for the bees, and things are changing evolutionarily. You don't normally see, don't necessarily see bees with deformed wings while the virus is in the hive. You'll often start to see the brood start to die first before you see bees with deformed wings. Then we get to the point where we call it parasitic mite syndrome, where the brood starts to die wholesale, and pretty soon this colony will collapse. And what we'll see then is the colony depopulate, all the adult bees fly away, abandoning whatever brood there is there, and we'll see the telltale fecal deposits of the mites in the cells. So I'm going to come up with a number of concepts for Varroa management that have helped us to understand how to deal with the mite in our own operation. So the main concept is Varroa management is all about controlling the vector of the virus. It's not the mite that kills your colony. It's the viruses that kill the colony. And in this plot here, this is a plot of the mite infestation rate, mites per 100 bees in the hive, and over time right here. And that's this red line right here. And it shows how the mite infestation rate increases throughout the year. Once it gets above about 5 mites per 100 bees, the viruses go epidemic. So this is a plot for the deformed wing virus, the prevalence of highly infected worker bees in the hive. And this is for the paralytic viruses like cashmere bee cashmere bee virus or Israeli acute paralysis virus. You can see that virus prevalence exactly tracks the mite infestation rate in the hive. And with any kind of epidemic, human epidemic, such as malaria or dengue or yellow fever, the way you control the epidemic is by controlling the vector. You control mosquitoes, and then those mosquito-transmitted diseases are not an issue. So we beekeepers, we need to control the Varroa mite to prevent the transmission of these viruses. The next concept regards how many treatments you need to do per year. And the number of necessary mite reductions is dependent upon the number of months that a colony is rearing brood. So the beekeepers up in Canada, where the colonies only rear brood for maybe 6 months of the year, Varroa management is pretty easy for them. They can get by possibly with one treatment a year. Here in California, where we may have brood 12 months of the year, it's much more difficult. Anytime you see sealed brood in a hive, imagine that you're looking at Varroa food. So this is a big frame of Varroa food, and Varroa will be increasing rapidly. Anytime you see brood, that means mite reproduction is taking place. I have a mite model that you can easily download, Randy's Varroa model. It's free on the web, works on Excel. And you can put in how many months your colonies are rearing brood. So this is 6 months here. And it'll show the increase of the mite population. So starting with 1 mite, it will increase to about 50 mites over the course of 6 months. And then if there's a brood break due to winter weather or summer drought, then the mites will slowly decrease, but they won't increase completely back to the starting level. They wind up with 20 times the starting level. So that would mean this colony might survive for the first year, but the second year is going to start with 20 times as many mites, and it won't make it through the second year. What I've done here is I've plotted out different numbers of months with brood, 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, or 12 months. You can see with only 6 months of brood rearing, so if you're at a high elevation where you have a long winter, then the mites will build up a little bit and then they'll drop back down. 8 months of brood, the mites build up to maybe 200 times the starting count. 10 months, you're up to 700 times the starting count. And if you get up to 12 months of brood rearing, you're up to 1,000 times the starting count of mites. So much, much more difficult to control the mites where you have year-round brood rearing. The other thing I'm seeing is this is a record from our National Atmospheric Association. And it shows the temperature in November and January. So winter average temperature over the course of California history from 1895 through 2020. And this is my lifespan right here, this blue plot. You can see over my life, our winters have become much warmer in California, and our summers are much, much warmer in California. The point here is, notice you have some very warm winters, and you have some cold winters. In a cold winter, you have a longer brood break, so there's less Varroa reproduction. That Varroa starts later in the spring. On a very warm winter, Varroa may not shut down, or at least gets an earlier start. So following a warm winter, Varroa is going to be more difficult to manage than it will be following a cold winter. You can use Randy's Varroa model here. And this is a model, it shows the total population of bees in the hive. It's all customizable. The amount of sealed brood, so these would be pupae in the hive. The red would be the amount of the percentage of sealed brood that's infested by a mite. This would be your total mite count in the hive. And this would be a mite wash count of a half cup of bees, how many mites you'd find on a half cup of bees. And then down here, it tells you what the mite population is. You can put in how much mite immigration from outside. It'll show you the percentage of mites that are inside the brood at any time. Then these yellow cells, you can enter in your mite reductions by treatment. And for you guys in the Southern Hemisphere, type an X here and it will change all these dates for your calendar down there. And as you see, if you only have moderate brood break during the winter, you could get by with to 90% mite reductions, and that would keep the mites down to just barely to a reasonable level right here. If you lived in a Mediterranean climate, such as me here in California, where we have early brood rearing, and then during the dry summer, there's very little brood rearing, and then they ramp up a little bit in the fall, we need a minimum of 90% mite reductions throughout the season. That's only if there's not extensive immigration of mites. So I've got 250 mites coming in, immigrating in from outside here. As a California almond pollinator, it's much tougher. We need 4 mite reductions throughout the year to really keep our mites down to a low level. As you can see here, I started with 50 mites. I'm ending with 28 mites. So this would be a sustainable management plan right here. We'll talk later about what kinds of treatments you can use for these reductions. Okay, concept number 3. You get the most bang for your buck by getting your mites under control early in the spring and keeping them low. Mites reproduce at different rates. They're most effective at reproducing early in the spring when colonies are just about swarm condition, when they have lots of drone brood, a very high ratio of brood to worker bees in the hive, and mites reproduce very efficiently at that time. When I plot this out, so what I have here, this is the mite population. This is the change in mite population. This is the change in the honeybee population. If there's no change over each 15-day period, these lines would be right at this level. That's no change across here. So as you see, many people are under the misconception that the bees take off in the spring and leave Varroa behind, and Varroa catches up later. What this shows you is, in reality, Varroa takes off ahead of the bees in the spring and reproduces at a faster rate than the honeybees all throughout the season until they finally drop off when the colonies cease rearing brood. So this would be November for us, fall for us when they cease rearing brood. The take-home message is that you get your most rapid rate of Varroa increase early in the season right here. So this is really the critical time to control Varroa. And Varroa increases exponentially in the hive as long as there is brood rearing going on. What you can do is nip it in the bud by treating early in the season, and that will keep that mite population down for a very, very long time, just from an early treatment. So early spring treatment, late winter treatment is the most important time to treat for Varroa. The next concept is that the higher the mite population gets, the more rapid its rate of increase. And the reason for that is that on an exponential growth curve, you take the current population and then multiply it by the growth rate. So the larger the current population, the higher or the larger the number of mice that are reproduced during the next growth period. So it really takes off. So I did some simulations here. So this is the number of months across here. This is your mite population. And I started in these colonies with only 10 mites here, 25, 50, 100, 150 mites. You can see with only starting with 10 mites, even after 7 months of brood rearing, Varroa is still not a problem. And it's still a slow rate of increase, even if you start with 150 mites. But notice here, once this mite population starts to get up, then it starts this exponential rate of increase is very, very fast. And the absolute value of number of mites per week increasing in the hive is really, really high. So what you want to do is to keep that mite population down all throughout the season. Take home lesson here. It's much better and it's easier to keep the mite levels low all throughout the season rather than trying to bring them down later. So this beekeeper here was very proactive, did an 80% mite reduction in the springtime. And I should have redone all these graphs for you with the dates differently. So this is midwinter right here. This would be midsummer right here. Just forget the dates right now. You can type an X in on your own models and get the dates right for yourselves. But this 80% reduction here bought that beekeeper time clear through late summer and then another low efficacy 80% treatment, and then a oxalic acid dribble in during winter would do a good job for him. And the main mistake that beekeepers make is they do too little, too late. So this beekeeper allowed the mite population to build up until late summer, did a 95% efficacy treatment, dropped that mite population way down, but it's too late. The virus epidemic is already raging in the hive, and that colony will collapse. Whereas this beekeeper got the mice down low in the season and then hit them a second time here, and this colony will go into winter in great shape. The other thing to keep in mind, and this is what I've noticed, we do thousands of mite washes. So I have a really good idea of seeing colonies at various levels of mites. And colonies that have low mite levels are much more productive. They grow larger, they put on more honey than those in which you allow the mite levels to increase. So just from the business standpoint, the lower you can keep your mite levels in your hives, the more return you're going to get from your colonies in production. Okay, next concept. Never take your eyes off Varroa, because Varroa just is going to keep reproducing independent of you. If you're relying upon visual inspection, waiting to see mites on the back of the bees, that's not going to work, because mites are rarely on the back of the bees. Most of the time, they're on the underside of the bees' abdomens, where they can have ready access to the fat bodies that they feed on. By the time you start seeing mites on the back of the bees, it's already too late. The mite population is high. And if you run the simulation in my model right here, you can look at right down here where it says % of mites in the brood. And you can see in the springtime, you may have 70 to 80% of the mites hiding in the brood. That's meaning only 20% of the mites are actually out on the bees. You're not going to see any of them. Most of the season, it runs about 50 to 60% of the mites are in the brood. So 40 to 60% of the mites are out on the bees. If you do see bees with dying wing or deformed wings or dying brood, you can assume that you have a high mite population. You may also, late in the season, if you look on the ground in your apiary, see bees crawling around with deformed wings. If you see this in your apiary, you can assume you've got some hives with very high Varroa levels. So for monitoring for the mites, one way to do it is with sticky boards, which track natural mite fall. If you're over 40 years of age with your aging eyes, it's a pain in the butt. What I found is these are so erratic. The mite drop per day can vary by a factor of 3, and it's dependent upon how large the colony is and how much brood rearing is going on. So we don't use natural mite fall sticky boards anymore in our operation, other than in scientific research where I need to test the efficacy of a chemical or something. Actually, I'm doing that today. Set up a bunch of sticky boards yesterday. The other one that people are using is the sugar roll or sugar shake, where you roll the bees in some powdered sugar, let them sit, and then shake them very hard to shake the mites off. And I have tested this with using both a gentle shake and a full 60 seconds of shaking. Now, most people are not going to shake for 60 seconds. It seems like an eternity, but I timed it for a full 60 seconds. And I found out that my mite recovery is often only around 50%, never above 80% mite recovery. So it underestimated the infestation rate. Whereas with a sugar roll with a very vigorous shake, where you really beat the bees up and shake them hard, I only got 2 out of 10 where I got a 95% recovery of the mites. And I got down to as low as 50% recovery in one of them, even with a very vigorous shake. So be aware that the sugar shake can easily underestimate your mite count. On my website, I also have some recent articles on where I sampled all the frames in the hive one by one to look at the mite infestation rates. And you're going to get your highest mite infestation rate by far from a brood frame with open brood with young larvae, and somewhat lower from frames, the honey frames. What we do is we standardize all of our mite washes by taking a frame that is adjacent to the brood, but does not contain brood. That way, there's much less chance of disturbing the queen when you're taking it, and it's a more consistent mite wash. So we standardize our mite washes, always shaking the bees from a frame adjacent to the brood nest, but not actually containing brood. And we shake those bees into a tub, let the older bees fly off, scoop up a level half cup of bees, 125 milliliters, and dump them. We used to use alcohol. Now we're using Dawn dishwasher detergent, which we find is cheaper and actually does a better job at getting the mites off the bees. And I have articles on my website showing the step-by-step process for this. You can make a very simple homemade mite washer. I got plans for this, just with a piece of tulle fabric and some plastic cups. So very easy to manufacture at home. You don't want to shake the bees up and down. You want to swirl this around so you don't keep stirring the mites up. You want the mites just to precipitate down, just like panning for gold. You just agitate it slightly and let the mites fall down to the bottom. If you do use alcohol, you'll get much better recovery of mites with 91% alcohol than you will with lower proof alcohol. But we like Dawn detergent the best. Now with the Dawn detergent, you're going to get bubbles on the top. So we take a magnifying makeup mirror, such as the ladies use, or maybe some of you guys use too. We lay it flat, a 6-inch diameter mirror, 10 times magnification, and we place it 4 inches. I can't remember how many centimeters that is below the cup. Anyway, this works great. It lets you see the mites very easily from the bottom and count them. This obviously is more mites than you want to see in a hive. Here's our setup. I actually have a dedicated vehicle and a pull-out table, a little holder for the cups with the mirror under there, and have a helper do these agitations while I'm taking the mite samples. As far as counts, in the springtime, we want to see counts of 0 to 1 mite. We start getting 2 mites early in the spring. We will do a treatment. During the summer, we'll let them peak out at maybe 6 mites in an alcohol wash or a detergent wash. We get above 6, we will treat them. The next thing to concept is that the drift of bees from hive to hive. Young bees that are newly emerged, when they take their first orientation flights, often get lost and drift to other hives. Well, those young bees are the bees that most likely have a mite on their bodies. Mites prefer the young bees. So a lot of mites drift around from hive to hive with these bees. Here's some actual data, and I've taken this data by eliminating all the mites from a hive with using 2 synthetic chemicals. And then using sticky boards, I can track. These are counts taken biweekly, so 3 or 4 days apart, of the number of mites that are coming in from outside that hive. There's no mite reproduction and no mites in the hive. As soon as the mites come in, they get killed by the miticides and drop to the sticky board. You can see up here, we're getting 40 mites every 3 days coming into the hive. Our cumulative count right here is over 500 mites in late fall coming into the hive. So, and there's years where I don't have data for it, but I suspect we were up in the thousands of mites coming into the hives late in the fall. So drift is a real thing. And if I do a simulation, 2 simulations exactly the same 95% reduction, but in this one, I entered 0 for a total of mite immigration. And this one I put in 495 mites coming in for a total. This colony survives the winter. This colony does not. That extra immigration can make the difference between a colony surviving the winter or not if you've done the same treatment. Okay, number 8. What we do now is we take actually mite washes from every single hive in our operation. Now we use mechanical battery-powered agitators. This would be very hard to do if you're doing it by hand, but we actually do. We run about 1,500 hives in our operation, and we do mite washes on all. At that time of the year, we often are running 2,000 hives in early summer. So we will do mite washes on 2,000 hives, and we find that actually saves us money, and the money that we can save in unneeded mite treatments, that pays for the labor of doing all the mite washes. But the most important thing is we identify the mite disseminators, the high mite hives, and we can deal with them. So we learned this back in 2015 when we did our first large-scale mite washes with it. My first mechanical agitator. I now build much smaller ones now. I'm working on a new design, actually, which I'll be publishing. And what we found was, this is the number of hives out of the 203 hives we sampled at that time. And this was the mite wash count for those hives. So this was in September, in fall, after we'd already treated the hives twice for Varroa. And over half of those hives had mite counts in the 0 to 5 range, very low. So we were happy with that. Some more had it a little bit higher, but all of these hives would be okay. They would have been just fine by the time we got the oxalic acid treatment on in early winter. It's these hives here with these incredibly high mite counts, these outliers. This one up a count of 100 mites in a mite wash right here. What we found was, when I did the math, that these hives constituted 25% of our hives. I'm sorry, 75% of our hives, whereas these here constituted only 25% of our hives. But this 25% contained 75% of all the mites in our whole operation. And these super high mite hives, that constant drift of young bees carrying mites from the high mite hives to the low mite hives, cause the average mite count in the whole operation to go up. So if you can control these super high mite hives, eliminate them from the operation, it makes managing all the rest of your hives much, much easier. So next concept, this leads to the next concept, that unmanaged hives, mites, the hives that aren't managed well for mites, they do spread their mites to their neighbors. Now imagine that you're a farmer, and you are growing apples or some other crop, and you said, oh, I'm not going to manage for pests. Well, the other farmers around you are going to get that drift from you of pests, and they're going to come on over and they're going to have a talk with you. They're going to say, you're becoming a nuisance. You're making farming hard for us because you're not managing your pests. Mites are your pests. I did a large trial, I haven't published it yet, where we glued metal tags on the backs of 6,000 bees in colonies that were about to collapse from Varroa. And then we put magnetic capture devices on entrances of hives in apiaries at various distances from the tagged hives. And we saw how far bees and mites drifted from those hives. And we found out that you get a lot of drift up to 1 kilometer distant from the hive. So anybody within 1 kilometer of where you have unmanaged hives suffers from that mite drift. So when you have hives that aren't managed for mites, these are they disseminate mites and viruses, because these mites carry the viruses throughout the entire landscape before they die. We didn't see an uptick of drift at actual collapse of the hives. We just saw it during that period of time as the mites built up in these hives, but no sudden, it wasn't a bomb effect, it was a long-term effect as the bees kept drifting, carrying mites. What we do with ours, when we have a very high mite hives, we bring those hives in, we hit them really hard with formic acid. We actually will, we make our own pads and give them a very strong dose, strong enough often to kill the queen. But that we want to eliminate all the mites from those hives. It doesn't hurt the brood. And then we give them a fresh queen. We just combine them with a nucleus hive and give them a fresh star. So instead of letting those hives die, formic acid is very cheap, very easy to wipe out all the mites. And then you can, it doesn't leave any residues, doesn't contaminate the combs or the honey. And then you can start over with a fresh queen. And most of the bees in the brood are still alive, but you take care of the mites. So what I suggest is here in the United States, we have people who want to be treatment-free beekeepers. And that's just an excuse for neglectful beekeeping and poor animal husbandry. If you're going to keep bees, control Varroa in your hives and benefit everybody so your neighbors don't suffer. So how do we actually manage the mite? For any agricultural pest, you have what's called integrated pest management pyramid. You start off with resistant stock. So when you have a disease that's affecting lettuce, you breed for lettuce cultivars that are resistant to that disease. Then you may do physical things. So maybe like with grapevines, you're going to prune them so they get more sunlight and more air to avoid mildew problems. Or with Varroa, you may do things such as dividing the hives. Some people use sugar dusting, other mechanical methods. Drone trapping would be one. And then, of course, you monitor for the pest. And if you do reach an action threshold that you need to deal with the pest, you would first use a biopesticide. So that would be like an organic acid or an essential oil. And as a last resort, you use synthetic chemicals. Unfortunately, in most countries, when Varroa invaded, the beekeepers just skipped all these steps and went straight to the synthetic chemicals. And what we're seeing now is throughout the world, the mites have developed resistance to these synthetic chemicals. We've already blown through fluvalinate and coumaphos here in the United States very quickly, and amitraz is now failing. In Europe, where they've had the mite even longer, none of those chemicals are working well. And the beekeepers wholesale are shifting back to the natural treatments, especially with oxalic acid. Oxalic acid and thymol are the two most promising of the biopesticides. And that's all that we've used for many years in our operation. Okay, so let's start of how we would do this, resistant stock and biotechnical methods. The eventual goal is for us to keep bees that can control Varroa all by themselves. And this has happened in a number of populations of bees throughout the world. South Africa being notable, how quickly, if you didn't intervene, that the bees can develop resistance to the mites. So the South African beekeepers, they don't manage Varroa at all. It's in all their hives, but they do not consider it a problem in any way. The Africanized bees throughout much of South America, Central America, Mexico, and up into Southern California, they're not as nice to work as the European bees, but they also do a better job of controlling the mite. Not a great job. They still benefit from mite management. They do a better job. So for selective breeding for Varroa resistance, this is something I've been very much involved in for the last several years. And because bees can come up with all kinds of different ways of breeding for resistance. And this is a great article here, a recent one, showing different ways that they can do it. The most common method the bees, when left to their own devices, is not by grooming and not by removing brood, but by this uncapping, recapping behavior where they just disrupt the mite reproduction while they're in the cells. And I see this behavior in my resistant colonies. What I decided to do is to walk the walk and for the benefit of our Northern America bee breeders, and said, hey, what if I just tried a very simple method of just following suggestion by Harbaugh and Harris back in 1999 to simply compare the growth of mite populations in all my colonies and then only breed from the ones that had the least amount of mite growth. So I'm doing this walking the walk, and I'm being followed very carefully by the large bee breeders in the United States. I'm keeping this very simple, so no fancy type of science. You simply start nukes in the spring with reduced levels of mites. And in my operation where I live, this would be your typical mite wash count, getting up into the 30s, 50s, 70s, and the colonies would all collapse here late in the season. With my resistant colonies, these are what we're getting. So we do a test in early summer, midsummer, late summer, and autumn, and then we'll do another test in the next spring. And typically, they keep the mite counts down like counts of 1, 2, 0 for the entire year. They may bump up a little bit right here in the fall, but they'll take them back down to 0. So we've only bred off of colonies for several years now that are able to manage the mites all by themselves. And these colonies are run right in the yards with the rest of our hives. Any colonies that fail this test, the mite count starts to go up. We simply remove them from the breeding program. The hives stay there. We just take the tag off the top and we treat them for mites. So these resistant hives don't get any special attention. They stay in the yard with all the other hives. They just don't get treated. And we have a lot of hives where they just keep the mite counts to 0 all by themselves. And my assistant said, oh, we like this. Zeros are heroes. And these zero mite breeders are great. The problem is, just because a colony can manage mites all by itself doesn't mean that the queen carries all the genetics. It's not a very heritable trait. So we're working on this, on heritability. The exciting thing that we found, though, is that they're beautiful colonies. You can see a little bit of the spottiness from the uncapping, recapping behavior, but they're productive. They're often the most productive in the yards, making the most honey, and very, very gentle. We don't see any association with defensiveness or anything. So these, we're very happy with these, and it's very exciting seeing these colonies that don't need any Varroa control at all and are very productive and gentle. So we started off with less than 1% of the colonies in our operation managing the mites by themselves. And we built up over the year, and I don't know what happened this year. We dropped down. We were hoping for this trend to continue up high. So we'll see what happens next year. So progress is slow. So right now we're still under 10% of our colonies that are fully resistant to mites. So we don't claim mite resistance. I'd want to get up to that 90% range, but it sure is beautiful working with these hives that don't need any mite management at all. And I can tell you right now that someday Varroa will only be a minor problem. The bees will evolve with us or without us. But when we start getting enough breeders interested that we have resistant stock, everybody's going to shift over to mite resistant stock, and you won't have to worry about treating anymore. But until then, we're going to have to deal with managing the mites. So biotechnical methods. You can do drone brood trapping. This is our own, how we make our own drone frames. We leave about 2 inches of worker brood above and leave this blank. We drop it in the upper box and let the bees, they will always put drone brood right here. And then when it's full of bees, you can cut it out. This helps a bit. This is not going to control the mites entirely. So we cut it out once a year. But we use this for controlling where the bees build drone comb in our colonies. We sell a lot of nucleus colonies, and the buyers don't like drone combs, drone brood in the worker brood frames. So this tells the bees where to put the drone comb. This also helps us to remove drones from high mite colonies so they don't mate with our low mite breeders. There's also an interest in thermotherapy, where you heat up the hives to kill the mites. The mites are more sensitive to the temperature than the bees. I did a test of this last year on 4 different hives, heating them up for 3 hours, and drives the bees out here to see how well it killed the mites in there. Then I dissected the brood out. I've written this up. It's on my website. Surprisingly poor mite kill in the sealed brood. Then the question was, well, are the remaining live mites sterilized by that heat? And looking here, this would be our mite wash counts for a half cup of bees at day 0, 24 hours, day 15, a month later up to day 42 from the 4 different hives. And what you can see, yes, the mite counts did go down for 15 days. Now, if these mites were sterilized, the counts would continue to go down. But no, we saw the counts go right back up. So no indication that those mites were sterilized by the heat. So we don't, for a commercial beekeeper, I can't see heat sterilization being useful. One thing we do is springtime splitting. We split all of our hives in the springtime when we return from our almond pollination. We set up an assembly line, and we make about 200 nucleus colonies every day until we've split every hive in the operation. And then we do a simple thing. It's called, if you look up on my website, simple early treatment of nukes. It shows that if we put a queen cell in, you have this 1-day treatment window when there's no sealed brood in the hive, where a simple oxalic acid dribble will kill most of the mites in the hive. And so you hit them on about day 18 with oxalic acid, or you can put an Apivar amatraz strip in at that time. And so this, the most important thing, you've got to get it right on day 18 before there's new brood being sealed. This cost us 5 cents worth of oxalic acid, and takes us 5 seconds to put this on per hive. So we do this to every hive. This starts us off clean every spring. The other thing you can do if you're a smaller scale beekeeper, take your hives before they swarm in the spring and separate out the sealed brood from the open brood and create 2 hives. And this is on my website. I'll give you the link to this at the end of this presentation. But you put all the sealed brood into 1 hive with a queen cell, and put the original queen back with only the open brood and then open frames and honey. Let the field force return, and this colony will immediately recover its strength. But you hit them with oxalic acid immediately, and now you have a mite-free colony with the old queen. This one, you have to wait 18 days, and then you hit it with oxalic acid dribble, and now you have a mite-free colony with a new queen. So either you can keep the 2 colonies separate or combine them back together for the honey flow, and now you've avoided swarming, you've controlled the mites, and you've requeened your colony. So this method is popular in Europe, and for the small-scale beekeeper, can work quite well. When we get to treatments, understand that each treatment has limitations and best windows for use during the season. So amitraz needs to be taken off before you put your honey supers on. Formic acid and hops beta acids can be used while the honey supers are on. Thymol is not recommended early in the season because it suppresses brood rearing. So we use this in the late summer after we've pulled the honey. And then oxalic acid, at least in the North America, is registered only for the early spring and fall. I'm trying to get it registered for us to use throughout the season with the extended release oxalic acid, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. As far as synthetic miticides, Coumaphos is largely fails now. The mites are resistant. You may be able to return to Apistan, the fluvalinate, or possibly flumethrin, but most beekeepers, commercial beekeepers, are using some form of amitraz with the apivar strips in North America. I don't know what you have down in your country with amitraz. But these are quite pricey. These work really well early in the season, like on nucleus colonies, because then 1 strip can eliminate the mites from the colony. But we are seeing signs of resistance throughout the world to amitraz. I don't know how many more years this will be efficacious. And it takes about 8 weeks for full efficacy with amitraz. Big mite reductions the first 3 weeks, and then slow reductions. So it's not a very quick treatment. So the Canadian beekeepers, they use it in the springtime as opposed to a fall treatment. The hops beta acids, there's a new product out, the HopGuard 3. This works very well when there's no brood in the colony, but for a summertime treatment, when there's brood, you would have to repeat this once every week for 2 or 3 weeks to get the mites down. Now let's get to the essential oils. There's a number of them, and lots of beekeepers just love pouring essential oils into their beehives. And what they don't realize is there's a reason that plants make essential oils. They're called secondary metabolites. And the plants make them because they are repellent to insects or kill insects. Honeybees hate most essential oils. So the last thing I'd be doing is dumping essential oils into my hive. Which we want is the most well-proven is Thymol, and the bees hate Thymol, but it works really well in late summer for mite control. We use the ApiGuard gel. We actually make a homemade ApiGuard if you wish. And then there's other products on the market with Thymol. We've had very good success for many years in California. We make a 1.5 inch tall rim that sits on top of the hive below the cover to put an airspace around here, put 50 grams of ApiGuard on, and then repeat this after 10 days. Now, if you're using ApiGuard, it's only efficacious if the bees physically pick this up and remove it. If you don't have enough bees up to the top of the box that they don't remove this, you will not get good mite control. So we put this on in late summer after we pull our honey. We've been very happy with the ApiGuard gel. There's some new research just recently published out of Canada where they put Thymol dissolved in glycerin. It doesn't actually dissolve, but they put it in glycerin for extended release. And this looks really promising, exciting. It's something I've worked on a bit a few years ago, so I'm resuming research just this week at home, and I'm currently running trials. Yeah, here we go. I'm testing with cotton pads here of Thymol and glycerin for extended release to see what kind of pads I want to use. So Thymol, proven efficacy over many decades, inexpensive, easy to apply, but it does suppress brood rearing temporarily, so don't use it early in the season. Then we have our organic acids, formic acid and oxalic acid. Formic has a huge advantage that it vaporizes at room temperature and will penetrate the cappings, can kill the mites with underneath the cappings. Formic acid is a natural product produced by ants. These are carpenter ants from up where I live. And if you pick these up and sniff them, your breath will stop from the formic acid, make your eyes water. But there's lots to be said for formic acid, widely used in Europe and also in Asia. And it can penetrate the cappings and kill the mites that are in the brood. The other thing we see is after you've treated with formic acid, it does something, because you can have a colony that just has really lousy brood pattern, and when the queen starts laying again, the brood just comes back beautifully, always. So formic acid gives colonies a very nice, fresh start. So we have now in the United States, Formic Pro strips. One strip placed and repeated after 10 days is much easier on the bees and the queen. You also can cover the top of the strip with a piece of plastic or wood, especially with smaller hives, to slow down the evaporation rate. So we've experimented with that a lot. We use this even on 5-frame nukes by covering the top of the strip to slow the evaporation rate. And this will give you very good mite control. But you may, in hot weather, have some queens being replaced by the bees. And they usually will replace the queens, especially when you use one strip repeated at 10 days. The other one is 2 strips at once. This will give you a faster knockdown, but it is more problematic with the queens. And then there's all kinds of other ways of applying formic acid. And we've experimented with this, the flash treatment and other ones. And again, different ways to use it. They're not all registered for use. I'm not going to go into them. But formic is really good at, if you really want to just get the mites killed really quickly in a few days in a hive, formic acid will do the trick. And the downside of formic acid, yes, is the fear of losing the queen. And I'm not convinced that it's the formic that kills the queen. It may be the bees in response to the formic that kill their queen. There's still more to learn on this. So one of the things you can do, especially if you're a smaller beekeeper, simply remove the queen from the colony before you treat it. Put her in a cage in the house or put her in a nucleus colony. Hit the hive with formic acid. After 3 days, the formic vapor levels are very low. You can put the queen back in the hive at that time and not have to worry about losing your queen bee. So pros and cons of formic: it can be used while the honey supers are on. It does go into the cappings and it doesn't leave any residues. It doesn't contaminate your combs. It also eliminates the tracheal mite. The downsides are it's tricky in hot weather. It makes a brief brood break for about five days. And of course the queen loss. Now, here's the exciting one we use. Here's my grandson sucking on Buttercup oxalis. All of us kids in California grow up sucking on this, which is the sap is oxalic acid and sugar right here. So we're essentially treating our hives with what's in the sap of this Buttercup oxalis. It tastes like lemonade. And we dribble it on at the rate of 5 milliliters per seam of bees in the hive. It has to be on the bees, not on the wood. And you can online, if you just Google oxalic acid treatment table, this table will come up. It'll show you how to mix any amount that you want very accurately. We use the medium strength here. In warmer areas, you may want to use the hot strength. If you have a long winter, use the lower strength right here. The other thing is this is shows it for mixing it with sugar. A number of us are now mixing it with glycerin instead because the bees are not tempted to eat it themselves if you dribble it. If it's mixed with glycerin, they don't like the taste of glycerin. So you wind up with less problems with the bees with the glycerin dribble. The glycerin also helps to distribute the oxalic acid better on the bees. But I do have the same formula for the glycerin on this web page now. We apply it using a garden sprayer pumped to a low volume with a lot of airspace in here for steady, and we calibrate it. So 1 second will put out 5 milliliters. So you just go chimpanzee 1, chimpanzee 2, chimpanzee 3, or whatever you want to say. So it takes 10 seconds to apply it to the box, and we'll shoot some up here above the top of the cluster and let it dribble down on the top. And 2 of us, we can easily do 400 times in a day doing this. We really like the oxalic acid dribble applied this way. We've done this for many years and with great success. Here's my 2 sons doing it during the winter, tighter cluster, cold day, and hit these hives, and they come out in the springtime, just beautiful. So everybody should base their operation with an oxalic acid dribble. As soon as the colonies go broodless in the fall or late winter. Now in Europe, they're doing a lot of summertime oxalic acid now, where they're creating an artificial brood break or induced brood break by caging the queen. And they have a bunch of different kinds of cages. The problem being, when you cage the queen away from brood for a while, sometimes the bees then kill the queen when she's released. They don't like the queen to stop laying. One way to get around that is to use these excluder frames. And we use these in our queen rearing in order to trap the queen, a breeder queen, on one frame so we can have all even-aged larvae to graft. So these are homemade, piece of plywood, cut the red, tangle out, cut a queen excluder in half and make this size to fit half of a queen excluder and staple it in place. So we drop down to them. There's one queen excluder division board. There's the second, and here's the frame where the queen will lay right here. And here's the hive setup. And then you can put either a lid over here or you can put another queen excluder, and the queen is then trapped to this frame. The bees don't mind it with the queen being trapped to a frame, and they will not kill or supersede that queen then. For queen rearing, we rotate these frames every few days, but you can leave the queen on one frame for a long time. And then the timing is, you put her on day 0. On day 14, you can release the queen. And then on day 21, when the first brood is ready to emerge, you just take this frame out of the hive. This alone will reduce the mite population of the hive by 25 to 30%. But beyond that, at that point, when you remove it, you give them a dribble of oxalic acid. You're going to kill virtually all the mites in the whole hive. So very simple. Day 1, confine the queen. Day 14, release the queen. And day 21, remove that trap frame, let it chill to kill the mites and the brood in there, and then dribble the colony with oxalic acid. And this timing is on my website. I'll give you the web page at the end. Oxalic acid vaporization. This is interesting, very popular on the East Coast of the United States. We're not too crazy about our operation. It's very quick. You don't have to open the hive. You can blast the oxalic acid in. Doesn't seem to contaminate the honey in any way. But these are treatments by date, 10 days apart, with 2 hives. Here's the starting mite counts right here. To bring those mite counts down, you can see how many treatments it took. So the vaporization, when there is brood in the hive, is not very efficacious. You have to actually do it like 2 to 3 days apart to really get good efficacy. The second thing is my crew did not like vaporization at all. We've done oxalic acid dribble and extended release for many years, and those are very, very safe to the applicator. The vaporization, you do not want to breathe those fumes. So my crew doesn't like the vaporization at all. So now we get to the one that we're very excited about, this extended release, not yet approved. You guys may have Aluin cap down there. If that's registered in your area, that's the first one out there. And there's some other manufacturers looking to come up with some new ones. I'm hoping that we can get the beekeepers can be approved to just mix it up themselves. So here's cardboard strips similar to Aluin cap, but for a commercial beekeeper, this is very time consuming to put in and take out these cardboard strips. So I've tested various matrices. This is cellulose sponges we tested last year, and very, very high efficacy, the best of any of the mite treatments we tried as far as reduction. But it does take a while. We got our best efficacy after about 70 days. So 70 days, a long time. So the best bet is to apply this fairly early in the season, and it will control mites, even a very low dose. So you can read the most recent articles on my website about this. And I'm currently testing some new substrates. I just took this photograph a couple of days ago, and we're in the middle of a trial right now. I'll be going out as soon as I record this video and actually putting some of these in. And I do have a authorization. This is not approved in the United States. I don't know about your country, but I have to cover my butt here. And I'm thinking that this may be, we may use formic early in the season, use the extended release oxalic acid all during the honey flow. We could always use a thymol cleanup in the late season if we need it, and then an oxalic acid dribble going into winter. So as far as oxalic acid, inexpensive, very safe to apply other than the vaporization. Can be high efficacy, doesn't appear to harm the queens. The colonies are very tolerant of oxalic acid. Temperature independent, works just fine on hot days, but it does not work well if there's brood in the colony unless you're using the extended release. Okay, the last thing or second to the last concept is rotate your treatments. And even though it's unlikely that the Varroa is going to be able to evolve resistance to either oxalic acid or thymol, who knows, it could happen. So you want to rotate your treatments, and you can have amatraz in that rotation. In our operation, we rotate these treatments right here, and are very happy with that. Here's our actual mite management schedule. That in midwinter, we've started with a low mite level because we did an oxalic acid dribble in the when they went broodless earlier on. We bring it back from almonds. We split the colonies, create an induced brood break with a queen cell, and hit them with an oxalic acid dribble. That buys us time until midsummer at the end of the honey flow, where while the honey's still on, we'll hit them with a little bit of formic acid in one pad, reduce the mite levels a bit. Once we get the honey off, we give them the thymol treatment and get that mite level down really low here. We feed them protein in late summer in preparation for winter because we go to almond pollination, and then an oxalic acid dribble. Notice our mite counts never, ever get high at any time of the year. And we've used this treatment strategy for many years now, since 2001, with very, very high success. And you can customize it. You can customize this model to create whatever colony population and amount of brood for any elevation or any place you live. So it's fully customizable. Once you get that customized, then you can sit down at night and play with the different kinds of treatments you have available. And it shows on the model what kind of efficacies you can expect, and come up with your own management plan for your own objectives and your own cash flow for your own operation. The last concept. If you control Varroa, provide good nutrition, most of your problems will go away. Manage the mites, provide good nutrition, and beekeeping is pretty easy again. My recipe for healthy hives: keep young, vigorous queens in your colonies. We requeen all of our colonies every year. Provide good nutrition. So we do feed pollen sub at certain times of the year. Control Varroa all year long, never let it get high. Minimize your toxins. So if you use synthetic miticides or you're exposed to agricultural toxins, you may need to rotate your combs out. and mainly be proactive rather than reactive. Be ahead of the mites rather than trying to react to them once they've gotten high. And then if you go to my website, if you go to the beginners pages and first year of beekeeping, most of the charts and other things that I've showed you with print on them are on this page, so you can pull them off of there. All right, thanks, and happy beekeeping to all of you.
Muchísimas gracias por la exposición, estimado biólogo Randy Oliver. Hoy recibimos los alcances más relevantes sobre el control de la varroa y plagas cuarentenarias. Ahora pasamos a la segunda parte de la charla virtual, la ronda de preguntas. Thank you so much for the information, Randy. Now we are going to start with the second part from this presentation, the questions. Félix Jiménez, apicultor de Perú, nos pregunta, ¿cuáles son las recomendaciones para controlar la varroa considerando que las abejas en el Perú no hibernan? Félix Jiménez, beekeeper from Peru, he's asking to us, what are the recommendations to control varroa taking in consideration that bees in Peru do not hibernate? Randy?
Hello, Randy.
Hello, Randy. Hello, Randy. Hello, Randy. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Randy. So we are going to start with the second part from this presentation, the questions. One of the questions is that Felix Jimenez, beekeeper from Peru, he's asking to us, what are the recommendations to control varroa, taking in consideration that bees in Peru do not hibernate?
They do not what?
They do not hibernate.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's very much where we live. With climate change now, we used to get at least a month of brood break, and some winters now we don't get any brood break. So what we do is very much what you would have to do. The extended release oxalic acid works very, very well. We ran it this last year. I haven't published this yet. A single small strip in the colonies over the winter, when they do minimal brood rearing, and that worked very well. So we're happy with that. But all the same things apply. It's not much different in Peru than it is from California. We have 12 months of brood rearing in many places, and Varroa thrives there. So you rotate treatments. You look for use my Varroa model. You look for your treatment windows when you're not making money, when you are not making honey, and you figure out which product works best at which time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Johnny.
El cambio climático ha hecho que la situación y las condiciones en California, en su lugar de operación, tampoco ya invernen sus colmenas como antes. Actualmente, durante todo el tiempo, él hace trabajo de cría los 12 meses. Y de acuerdo a su sistema de control, él puede controlar la varroa durante todo el año. Creo que me perdí algo más, pero en conciso eso es lo que nos está dando a responder. El cambio climático ya no hace que en California las abejas descansen como descansaban hace años atrás. California tiene actividad todo el tiempo dentro de la cámara de cría.
Perfecto, muchas gracias Johnny, muchas gracias Randy. Nos vamos a la siguiente pregunta. Thank you so much Randy, thank you so much Johnny. We are going to start with the second question. Percy Luna desde el Cusco nos pregunta, en el Perú y Latinoamérica la africanización es fuerte y la agresividad va con ello, pero también es resistente a la varroa. En un proceso de cruzamiento para disminuir esta agresividad, ¿qué recomendaciones nos daría para poder disminuir el ataque de la varroa a la abeja europea, la cual es más dócil pero más débil a su vez? Percy Luna from Cusco, Peru, he's asking to us, in Peru and Latin America, the Africanization of bees is strong and comes with aggressiveness, but it's also resistant to varroa. On a reproductive process to reduce this aggressiveness, which recommendations would you give us for the reduction of Varroa attack on European bees, which is known to be docile but weaker as well?
I wish I had a good answer for that. And really in areas where there's Africanized bees, and this is in California, the southern part of California is all Africanized bees. And the beekeeper needs to make a choice. You choose either keeping the Africanized bee or you keep European bees and have to control your queens.
Thank you so much, Johnny.
Para eso tendría que tener la respuesta más correcta y agradable de todos. Pero en California, al sur de Estados Unidos, también hay abejas africanizadas. Y las abejas africanizadas tienen que ser decididas por los apicultores que quieran producir y quieran tratar. Los apicultores que quieran producir y quieran vivir de la apicultura tienen que decidir entre la abeja africanizada o europea y darle tratamientos correctos a la abeja europea para poder producir.
It's difficult to control your matings. We sell queens and nucleus colonies to Southern California because we can control our matings up here. There's no Africanized drones, but they can't do that down there. The first generation of hybrids are more defensive.
En California ellos tienen que vender núcleos y al vender los núcleos ellos tienen que vender abejas dóciles tienen que controlar la fecundación con zánganos africanos porque es un negocio que tiene que ser viable para la gente, ¿no?
Perfecto, perfect. Thank you so much, Randy. Thank you so much, Johnny. Muchas gracias, Randy. Muchas gracias, Johnny. El Servicio Nacional de Sanidad Agraria del Ministerio de Desarrollo Agrario y Riego agradece la participación de cada uno de ustedes, así como el importante aporte y alcances que nos dio el especialista sobre el tema. Los invitamos a conocer más a través de nuestras redes sociales en Instagram, Twitter, Facebook y YouTube. Muchísimas gracias a todos y muy buena tarde.
Tania, disculpa.
Sí, John.
Tenemos una última pregunta, por favor.
Claro.
Por favor.
Claro que sí.
La pregunta de Víctor Valdivia. ¿No la tienes ahí, Tania?
¿Nos podrías ayudar compartiendo la pregunta de Víctor Valdivia?
Víctor Valdivia from Peru, Randy, is asking, how's the best treatment according to your experience in the management Varroa mites? Which one is the best, simple and easy? And how many days need to be treated? With organic or synthetic treatment?
Well, synthetic treatments work very well until the mites become resistant. Go ahead.
Víctor Valdivia, de Perú, ha preguntado, en su opinión, ¿cuál es el mejor tratamiento para las colonias de abejas? ¿Y cuántos días es el tratamiento correcto? Si el tratamiento con productos orgánicos o productos químicos. Thank you, Randy.
So, well, okay, so the point is, it's a limited time that a synthetic is going to work. So in Europe now, all the synthetic miticides are failing. So they're being forced to go to the natural treatments.
El tratamiento con productos químicos es el tratamiento más rápido y posiblemente el que dé mayor resultados. Pero el tratamiento con productos químicos en Europa ha fracasado y están volviendo al tratamiento orgánico en estos momentos. One more question, please.
But hang on a second. I still haven't finished answering that question.
Okay.
I haven't answered the question. The question is, we don't stick to one single miticide. At sometimes, oxalic acid is best. Sometimes thymol is best. And sometimes formic acid is best.
No están basados en un solo tratamiento. Están basados en rotar los tratamientos. A veces el ácido fórmico es correcto y da resultados. A veces el timol y a veces el oxálico.
Mm-hmm. Now, in answer to his question of which one is the easiest and the safest, oxalic acid.
Cuando pregunta cuál de los tratamientos es más fácil, simple y correcto en su opinión, ácido oxálico.
Okay.
We have a lot of questions for sure. One more question that's coming from, I talk with a lot of people. We ask you the question, the bees is no hibernate now in California, in North America. Does mean the bees is active all year now, 100%, or going to sleep for 1 month, 2 months?
It depends upon where you live. At my elevation, they go to sleep generally about 3 weeks.
La pregunta que le hice fue que para definir y entender mejor si es que las abejas invernaban en Estados Unidos, responde que ahora las abejas en Estados Unidos se mantienen activas dependiendo del sitio y el área donde él trabaja, las abejas solamente pueden descansar un promedio de 3 semanas. Uh-huh. La otra pregunta que podríamos volver a preguntar es lo que preguntó nuestro amigo Percy Luna acerca de la abeja africanizada. De acuerdo a su experiencia, ¿usted recomendaría hacer cruces de abeja africanizada con europea? Esta es la pregunta. According to your experience, according to your investigation, is good to cross Africanized bees with European bees? Can give good results? What you recommending us? Because in Latin America and South America, we have a lot of Africanized bees. Mm-hmm. We have the dilemma. We change our bees for these bees because we have few knowledge of few teachers who teach to the peoples the best bees to management hives and strong bees is the Africanized bees. Mm-hmm. According to your experience, what you recommending us to us, please?
I see a business opportunity, and that is for the beekeepers at higher elevations where there are no Africanized bees they have a business opportunity to produce queens from bees that are gentle and sell them to the beekeepers down at the lower elevations.
Lo que él está viendo es que hay una oportunidad de negocio para los lugares que no tenemos abejas africanizadas, y los que no tenemos abejas africanizadas debemos criar abejas para poder vender a los que tienen abejas africanizadas y pueden cruzar. Yo creo que en simples palabras nos está diciendo que lo mejor es tener que manejar abejas europeas. No nos ha dicho correctamente eso, pero es lo que entiendo.
Muchas gracias, Johnny. Muchas gracias, Randy.
Gracias, Tania. Thank you very much, Randy. En name the Peruvian beekeepers, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for giving us your time. Gracias, Senasa. Gracias, Tania. Gracias por darnos la oportunidad y gracias por traernos este gran exponente, quien nos ha abierto los ojos a otra perspectiva y a otra dimensión. Thank you very much.
Johnny, if they have more questions, have them send them to you. You can email them to me and I'll shoot you back answers.
Thank you very much, Randy. We're going to compart your website, your profile in all Peruvian beekeepers and Latin American beekeepers. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Muchas gracias. Gracias. El Servicio Nacional de Sanidad Agraria del Ministerio de Desarrollo Agrario y Riego agradece la participación de cada uno de ustedes, así como el importante aporte y alcances que nos dio el especialista sobre el tema, y los invitamos siempre a conocer más sobre nuestras redes sociales: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook y YouTube. Muchas gracias y buena tarde a todos.
Gracias, Senasa.
Gracias.